Hello, Recursive community. Welcome back to the Recursive podcast, recording here in Sofia, in Kino-Vlajkova. And our next guest, let me introduce her to you. She combines the financial acumen with a very sharp investment eye. Irina Dimitrova is partner at LAUNCHub Ventures. She joined the venture capital fund since its inception and has been its financial director ever since. Prior to that, Irina worked in finance and investment banking, both in Sofia and in London. She was one of the first specialists to do IPOs in Bulgaria. She has a degree in banking and international finance from the City University in London. Irina Dimitrova, welcome to the Recursive podcast.
Thanks for having me.
It's actually, funny today because we're going to play, the Irina and the Irina,
Yeah.
which is not really a common name in Bulgaria, but
Yeah.
today we have this coincidence.
Yeah.
Usually with my guests, I try to catch their progress in time. And this is why I start my questions from the very, very beginning. I know that you were born in Bulgaria, but you studied in London. Can you tell me a bit about what led you back then to, pursue education abroad? These were the dark times where it was very fashionable and very
Yeah, but it was also very difficult, and especially in the UK, because at that point of time, I was one of the very few people actually that landed with an education in a UK university. Most of the people who were going abroad were going to the US, and very few actually had the opportunity to go to the UK. Mm-hmm. So it was a very unbeaten path at the time, like both the application process and the setting up, like in London, was a rather lonely experience, I would say.
Oh, yeah.
But the main reason was that the US universities had a lot more tuition grants for Bulgarian students, whereas in the UK that was a lot less so.
Mm. But you already had experience abroad. I think that when you were a kid, you lived in Singapore.
Yes, that was one of the very, very interesting parts of my growing up. My father is a pilot, so he was actually working from there for some part of his life. And landing in Singapore was just such an amazing experience, like such a clash of civilizations and cultures. Yeah.
At what stage was Singapore back then? Because right now it's actually a very modern, very also Western influenced city.
Yes, it was already.
It was already like that before.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was probably the big difference is that it wasn't as autocratic at the time, and there was a lot more kind of like feeling of freedom in the political sense than nowadays. But but in terms of development, it was highly developed. So both a combination of like the Western civilization and the Asian East influence. So very
they mix together. Yeah. Very well. Yeah. So how long did you spend in Singapore as a kid?
On and off about a year.
On and off about a year. And then you returned to Bulgaria, you finished the American college?
Yes.
And
proud alumni.
Proud alumni of the American college, and then continued your education in London.
Yeah.
And this is also a question that I usually ask to my guests. So when you applied at the university in London and then you continued your education, how did you imagine your life is going to be? What did you want to become?
Well, in the finance, education, which I was doing at the time. Like everyone was pursuing an investment banking job. The interesting thing is that just at the time when we were graduating and looking for graduate level entries to like investment banks, it was right after the dot-com bubble burst, and it was extremely difficult to actually find a job as like in an investment bank. Like banks were slashing jobs, not hiring anyone. So actually, it was a very difficult time to start your career. And for me, it was like double it was twice as difficult, because at that point of time, Bulgaria was not part of the European Union.
Oh, yeah.
And you had to prove that you're better and more fit for any job to be able to actually get a work permit for the UK. So it was a huge endeavor, and very few people from my graduation class actually landed with an investment banking job at the time. I think it was only 2 of us from 160 graduates.
Only 2 of you?
Yeah.
Wow. And what do you think was so special about you, besides luck, probably? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, luck always has something to do, but I just think I was very like determined and ambitious, and also I think I was kind of authentic. Like I wasn't just repeating like the blurb on the website. So that kind of made you stick out from the crowd.
Wow. And what does it take to be like a good investment banker? When you landed the job and when you were part of it for a while, did you feel like that's your calling, like this is where you feel home? Or were you also in a way at some point disappointed?
It was a very difficult, challenging job, extremely time draining. Like there was like not a working day which was shorter than 12 hours. And we started at 7 o'clock in the morning. It would go to at least 8 in the evening, usually like midnight, past midnight. So it was very physically draining, but it was like such a steep learning curve. But it was very, very rewarding to actually see yourself like move and get the recognition that you fight for. So actually, my claim to fame is that I was voted, like in my second year, into doing like in the research department of an investment bank. I was voted the #1 analyst in my particular field of like expertise.
What was your particular field, by the way?
Consumer goods.
Consumer goods.
Which covered anything from supermarkets to tobacco companies to luxury goods. So very broad and diverse field. So it was a particularly difficult field to actually cover and analyze, because like of the complexity of the like each particular kind of subset of companies.
And what was your big goal back then? Like, okay, you joined the company and then you probably also started climbing the career ladder, but did you have like a final destination? Like, okay, this is where I want to be. I don't know, like the corner office, what we usually get from the movies. I've never been in this environment, so I actually, I'm curious what people in such kind of environments strive for, dream of.
I never actually had like a particular, like one like job that I had to end up with. And actually that was kind of like part of my career development, that at one point of time I was doing very nicely, like climbing up the career ladder and getting recognized and like establishing a name in the field.
Yeah.
But at one point in my life, I just looked ahead and just thought, if I keep doing what I'm doing, I'll just keep climbing up the investment banking ladder, and I would end up with a very nice big house, a sports car, and things like that. But is that what I really, really want in life? Is that what drives me? And I did realize at one point that despite all your abilities and efforts and the time you put into what you're doing, the impact of what you're doing is very, very short term, at best.
Okay.
So I ended up thinking to myself that regardless of what I'm doing and how good I am at what I'm doing, you are just a rat in a rat race.
Yeah.
You're just competing with other people doing the same thing, but the impact of what you're doing, even if you're better than them, is very, very minimal and very short-lived.
Mm-hmm.
So that's kind of how I decided to come back to Bulgaria and to kind of be part of
did you give up on the nice apartment in London and the sports car in order to do that, I guess?
Yes.
Okay.
I did. And I've never regretted it.
Okay.
It was the best decision.
What year was that, by the way, when you decided to
2005.
2005. So it was just before we got part of the European Union.
Yeah.
3 years before that.
Yeah.
Wow. It was, by the way, around the time when I left. I think I left 2006. So I remember that we were still not very hopeful about the future in Bulgaria at this time. So it was still a kind of a difficult period, for at least the way that I perceived it at the age of 18 or 19. I guess from your perspective, maybe it was a bit different because at least you had an economic background. But then you moved back. And how did you start looking for a job where you would gain back this feeling of having an impact on the world, or contributing to society and economy in a meaningful way? Because I guess this is what you were looking for, right?
Yeah, be part of the building of something and kind of upping the level rather than, as I said, just participating in a race. To be honest, at that point of time, I was thinking about also changing the field in which I was working. So I was thinking of moving out of finance and into project management, which is something that I've done also before. I worked for a project management department in previous life.
Okay.
It was something that I really loved, and just thought it's something that I would be very happy to do. But at that point of time, project management was practically non-existent in Bulgaria.
Okay.
It was just a very highly specialized thing in large infrastructure projects or some very, very niche and highly technical professions and projects. So eventually I just thought, okay, so let's do what you're good at and where you can bring your experience and knowledge and where you can see yourself developing even more and helping others develop their skills and
And I think this is how you also joined with the team of Luban, right?
Todor. Actually.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. Then I mix it up.
Yeah. So, but that's also where I met Luban as well.
Okay.
So, we were working together with Todor, and Luban was a big client actually of the company for which we were working.
This is how the team started, coming together. So you worked with Todor, and Luban was your client. What kind of job was that back then? What kind of company was that?
Luban was running NetInfo, which is still the biggest online media in Bulgaria. So he's like the founder, and he's built the company to where it is, and eventually sold it. At that point of time, it was a moment when he was thinking about doing an IPO. That was kind of like our first work done together.
Yeah.
So we started on an IPO, which eventually led to a venture capital round, which was also something very, very new at the time.
Yes, I guess. Well, there were no funds at this point, right?
No, and actually he ended up with a very prominent investor from the US and Asia, who actually got on a plane and flew to Bulgaria to meet with Luben and start the process of actually doing a venture capital investment.
Wow.
So we switched from working on an IPO to actually doing a venture capital round. Yeah.
Okay, that's crazy. And you managed to raise it?
Yes. It was.
How much?
I don't know whether I'm allowed to, even though it was a long time ago. Yeah, okay. But it was the biggest round in the tech space at the time. Not only in Bulgaria, but the whole Southeastern Europe region. So it was, and as I said, like very prominent investor. It was a hugely successful financing round, and it turned out to be very profitable for the investors as well. So,
but with the brokerage, you were actually working also on different types of IPOs. So you were one of the first people who were preparing, companies to do an IPO at, I guess, not only Bulgarian stock exchange, but also on different stock exchanges.
Yes, on a regional scale.
Okay.
The biggest. I mean, I don't think I should be dropping names, but
of course,
I was.
We just realized, today that we're kind of like moving in the same bubble. So everyone knows everyone, but I'm curious.
But yeah, I mean, I've like worked I had massive involvement in 4 IPOs, and one of them was like really, really big, the biggest at the time.
Which was that?
The first investment bank one. And then I was also working on the first IT company, which got listed on the public stock exchange. And a few others, but at that point of time you could not really specialize in a particular vertical. You had to be competent in all kinds of industries to be able to like come up with a proper analysis.
Wow. And tell me, how did it, from the successful fundraising of the fund for NetInfo, how did it come to LAUNCHub Ventures, where you're one of the founding members, basically?
Yes, I mean, there were a few things in between which I would skip for to keep it succinct, but. When the European Investment Fund first published it's called a call for applications.
Yes.
So basically, Luben and Todor got together and decided that they want to go for it, and they called me and said, "This is what we want to do. We think it's an amazing opportunity. We want to make this big, and do you want to jump on the team and basically manage the application process?" This is how it started. And after we were successful with the application, they invited me to just be part of the thing from the very beginning.
And what was your experience with VC funds before that?
I've seen funding rounds,
yes,
but haven't actually, it was a challenge. It was when we started, we were always joking that we were a startup ourselves at the time. So yeah, I guess we've now reached the scale up.
The scale up phase.
Yeah.
Yes, true. Well, it is also entrepreneurial yourselves, I guess. You are also applying for funds the way that, startups are applying for funds at the VC funds. But in your case, it's a fund-of-fund structure, or the EAF back then with the Jeremy program.
Just wanted to say that
yes, please.
We've now expanded hugely the investor base. We started with EAF as the sole investor, but since 2015 we've actually been raising private capital.
We'll get into that. Yeah. We'll get into that. I just wanted to know, before we get there, I wanted to follow the whole line of, okay, so you started with LAUNCHub Ventures. It was one of the first funds back then to invest in startups at a time where, okay, not many people knew what startups are, I guess. There wasn't, like, what would you say was the level of entrepreneurial thinking back then? Were you worried that you won't find enough startups to invest in at that time?
Yes, it was a limited pool, but that was kind of what we were aiming for, and I think we've like the whole thing which started back in 2011-12 has been hugely successful already in just like building the mentality and the entrepreneurial mindset of the community overall. But yes, it was like a lot of people were thinking, like they had this romantic idea that if you come up with a brilliant idea and somebody is just going to come and like throw money at you and just because you have a good idea, it's going to be huge. Okay. And people hugely underestimated how difficult it is to actually build a product from an idea and actually be able to sell it to the users or the clients that need to know about your very good product. So this execution bit was kind of like people weren't thinking about like the building, the business development, and like the whole process of turning an idea into a product and a business was kind of missing in the mentality of the people. And we've had like so many times when somebody would come to kind of pitch an idea to you, and they would ask you to sign a non-disclosure agreement because they were worried that you're trying to steal their idea. And like you're like so many times you had to actually tell them that probably there are at least 100 other people that have the same or similar idea, and it's not the idea, it's how you build it into a product and a business that matters. And if you want the world to know about your product, you have to share the idea. You cannot keep it a secret. That's not how it works.
I think this kind of mentality is something that we have outgrown, although I see it every now and then.
Yeah, I mean, there's been a huge progress in that.
Definitely.
Yeah.
But tell me, you were also first-time investors, first-time VCs yourself. How did you define your role? How did you find yourself also in the investor role? I guess it was, at first it was a bit challenging. Like, what am I supposed to do? I mean, I see that they don't understand this and I don't understand this, but you can't jump in the company and then work with them.
Yeah, I mean, it was an educational process.
Yeah.
You had to educate the people that you want to invest in. How does it work, and what this capital that you're investing means for them, and like the importance of this overused like smart money term, but that it's not just pouring money and just waiting for magic to happen. Like it's hard work, and if you should be able to use your investors to your own good. And investors are not trying to overtake your company, neither are they going to operationally run the company for you. The understanding of what a VC fund, like what role a VC fund has into a VC funded company, was something that it was an educational process, as I said.
And in the beginning, I think LAUNCHub had also an accelerator program, right?
Yes, yes. Particularly the first 2 years were mostly acceleration kind of investments. Very early stage, some of them idea stage, but we did require that there is some kind of product, like at least an initial version of a product in place. So, but a lot of those companies actually didn't end up being able to produce a good business. So we eventually, as we ourselves matured, moved up a bit into more mature companies. And the good thing about our mandate is that we are regional fund. It's not Bulgaria only. We cover the whole Southeastern Europe.
Yes.
So both Bulgaria was maturing and growing up, but also the whole region.
Yes.
And we ended up investing in a lot of different, in 10 different countries actually from the region.
Yes. You were also investing in founders who were actually doing their business abroad, but maybe having some kind of representation here in the region.
We started doing that a lot more after 2015, so after our first fund. But yes, this is one of the kind of investment theses which we've been supporting, which is the so-called Diaspora Founders, people from the region, but actually located and starting their startups in other places, mostly the UK, the US. The idea being is that even though they start from a different location, they actually build a part of their team in the Southeastern Europe region, and that has actually proved to work quite well. And we've seen quite a few successful stories there.
Having your background very solidly in finance, what is your part in the investment process, and which is your favorite part in the investment process, by the way? Tell me.
I really love the deep dive, because every time we're looking at an investment, it's something that you've never actually seen before. You might know as much as you want about a particular industry or vertical or business model, but each company is a new case, so you need to educate yourself and understand the trends and the driving forces for each particular case. And the deep dive is my favorite part, but particularly the discussions which we have both internally and also with the founders. Because it's not like a yes or a no. It's usually you have to understand the whys and the how and as I said, the underlying dynamics are really important, and to understand those things, you need to be to have discussions, and those discussions are the best part of the process.
Interesting. What about the portfolio management afterwards? I'm not sure how many startups have actually enough knowledge to run a business when it comes to the financing and the controlling part and the accounting part. I still feel that it's one of the most favored, business functions in a company. Even for me, although I did enjoy math at school, sometimes it's just so administrative and so boring. Do you help them with that?
As I said, we don't get into the operational day-to-day running of the business.
Yes.
And we do encourage and try to stress the importance of actually setting your company legally, financially, and organizationally and HR-wise, like to have it properly set up as early as possible, because it only gets worse as the company develops and grows. But yeah, I mean, it's something that the founding team themselves have to get their head around. It's you can't impose it on them. But yes, we do try. I mean, it's a small part, but it's still part of evaluating the team, whether they are conscious enough that they have to kind of build a proper organization. It's not just a product that sits in vacuum.
Yeah, of course not. Of course not. Yeah. So, thinking of how it all started with LAUNCHub, that was like more than 10 years ago. No, 10 years ago. 10 years ago, actually.
Officially.
Yes.
Yeah.
And looking at it now, so I think you were kind of, becoming increasingly more regional over time. You managed to have several successful exits from your portfolio. So your thesis proved obviously somehow right? Okay. You grew your team as well, and you managed to fundraise actually also very an impressive amount.
Yeah, more than 74.
Tell me about the progress of how it all developed.
Well, as I already said, like the first years of the fund were focused on a lot more early stage, very, very early stage companies, but we realized that it's actually a bit more mature company. Well, mature is a very funny term to use for companies so early in their development.
So mature early stage. Okay. So what is that like? How would you define that in the sense of business development or a startup, growth?
Well, it goes down to traction. So basically, you have to have a product that's already being used by someone. So you need to have people who are already using your product, but ideally also paying for it, or
so they are actual customers.
Yeah, so you are really solving a pain for someone.
Okay.
So it's not just a hypothetical pain. It's actually kind of early adoption has already happened, and you have proven that somebody actually needs your product. So we kind of moved a bit further down the development spectrum. And then with our second fund and now with the third fund, we're more and more focused on this. We realized back in 2015 that there was this huge gap between the early stage investments, like the so-called angel rounds and very early seed stage rounds, and then getting to Series A, which is a very it's called the Valley of Death.
Valley of Death. Okay. Yes.
Yeah, I mean, both in terms of the development of the business, just like the organic development of the business, but also in terms of financing. There was a big gap there. So yeah, this is kind of where we decided to focus.
Why is it called the Valley of Death?
Because a lot of startups died at that stage.
Okay.
Either they cannot find product market fit, or they cannot build a team, or they cannot get financing and they run out of resources at one point.
And actually at this stage, a couple of years when you started the Series A kind of guidance of startups, or the Series A Academy, I know that you call it this way, back then there wasn't much opportunity, especially for founders in our region, to raise a Series A. They had to go internationally.
Yeah.
Okay.
And this is what we are also addressing with our new fund now, being able to actually participate or even lead the Series A rounds of companies.
Okay.
So kind of we've been moving with the movement of the startup system in Southeastern Europe. So the more companies you have who are at that stage, the more opportunity to deploy capital there is. So the more sense it makes to actually have a fund focused on that particular stage of development.
How many companies did you help with the Series A funding so far? Maybe not investing it yourself, but I don't know, helping them get to their investor at that level?
We have more than 10 companies with Series A rounds for the time, and we have like the Series B and even Series C nowadays. So, so some very successful stories there.
They are. We're always, keeping track of them. And I think to your team that you're always kind of like in time with the announcements. You give us some, at least a night, to work on the story. But the stories that we have written over the years about you are becoming more and more impressive. I also see the Recursive as an organization that is growing at the pace that the ecosystem is growing, just like you guys. You started and then we are also ourselves growing by the successes of the ecosystem. And speaking of success stories, how many exits did you have at this point with LAUNCHub or with all the funds? You have
10-ish.
to count. Yeah. 10-ish, yeah. I also have to count them. I don't know them by heart, but I would say also the same number. Okay. So I guess this is what also helped you with the fundraising of the last fund.
Yes, even though these funds are still kind of even though they're like it's already a 10-year fund, so in like the Western world, that would be considered like the end of life stage for a fund. But considering where we started and how early we were, you could still talk about this at the time when we were fundraising. Those portfolios were still approaching maturity rather than being at the level where, I mean, we still have some very good assets in them, which are still to actually realize their full value. So there's a lot more to come from there.
I think at this point there is also something, an interesting aspect. I think at this point you're still one of the few women who are in VC. Thinking of the region. There are different kind of data and different reports which say that the number of women in the funds would definitely increase also the number of investments or startups which are being funded and which are also led by women. If we look at the numbers, I think a year ago or 2 years ago, there was a very interesting report about Central and Eastern Europe that a very few or a much lower percentage of startups which are founded by women actually get funding. But when they get funding, the return of investment is
actually
definitely higher.
Yeah,
yes.
On a statistical level.
On a statistical level. Of course, we can also argue that, of course, only the women who are only the best will get the funding because it's they have to compete in a different way. So this is why they will probably also perform, statistically speaking, better than the men. But what do you think is the role of and the importance of diversity in the funds already, where the selection and the decisions are being taken for promoting more women going into entrepreneurship?
Diversity is an important factor, but it should not be an aim on its own.
Yes.
And this is actually something that I really want to actually see changing in the the whole ecosystem, that investment in women-led companies or funds is not seen as a public image exercise.
Okay, not like the greenwashing or diversity washing.
Impact investing, but actually is a sensible business decision. So, I mean, there's this kind of perception that, as you said, it's a kind of greenwashing, but it's more important that the pipeline of actually companies that have women on their founding team gets bigger. So it all starts from the pipeline.
But doesn't it kind of like depend on each other? Because we do have a lot of women in tech, but not many would dare on the entrepreneurial path for, I guess, many, many reasons. But in order for the pipeline to grow, you would probably also need a lot more role models. In order to have role models, you would need some kind of more pioneering funds who would say, okay, we will be supporting women especially or very purposefully or intentionally in order to build those success stories who are going to inspire then the next generation of female founders. Or this is the way that I would see it. I don't know.
As I said, investing in a company just because it has female founders is kind of, it should be driven by a business decision, a sensible business decision. If you think, and we do have actually a few companies with female founders, but the decision has not been led by whether or not it's a male or a female, but about the competences of the team.
Of course. No, I think what's being criticized here is that some of the investments are not being made because on subconscious level we do see women as less risk-prone and less confident maybe to run a business, to be leaders, because our perception of leadership and startup founders is so much shaped by manly kind of figure that sometimes subconsciously we don't trust women that they can actually build a startup. That's
there was a Harvard Business Review study which actually showed that VC investors actually ask different set of questions to female founders than they ask to male founders, and that the subset of questions asked to male founders is a lot more about the opportunity and the potential, whereas for women founders it's a lot more about the risk. Yes, there is this kind
and
of...
how to be safe and, not to lose the money. I think I remember this study and I found it very curious that somehow women are associated for being kind of responsible for the status quo, for the safety, for things not going south. But if you have to speak about doing something new, you would rather ask the man.
There is unfortunately this kind of stereotype.
Do you think internally you can manage somehow to, I don't know, give this kind of voice or give this kind of perspective in LAUNCHub?
I think we do already.
Yeah.
I think that, we're always very happy to see a female founder, and we have this strong belief that women are very good leaders. As I said, if it makes a good business decision to invest in a company, we would be very happy to do so with a female.
Speaking of questions, what is your favorite question to ask founders? I guess in the LAUNCHub team you have like different roles for each partner because you're also so diverse when it comes to the mindsets and your capabilities and skills. Which are the questions that you ask to founders?
I don't have a favorite question.
Okay.
It's, an investment decision is based on very complex judgment and evaluation. So we ask all sorts of questions. And no, we don't have the, I don't know, good cup, bad cup roles.
No.
And one being particularly focused on, I don't know, the go-to-market, and the other one being particularly focused on the product side or whatever. We all participate in the whole discussion and asking all kinds of questions. And even if one person asks about a particular area, that might bring some idea to you to actually explore a particular part of that, I don't know, go-to-market strategy or something like that. So we feed off each other. It's we don't have roles.
Okay, but if you look at your everyday tasks, what are you focused on?
I'm part of the investment committee, so the investment process is something that I'm involved in. But I also jiggle with all the operational, the backbone of the fund, and that includes everything from reporting to our investors. I'm also primarily responsible for the investor relations. So basically, from the process of the start of the fundraising to the end of the fund, the communication with the LPs, the investors, is a primary responsibility for me. But also, obviously, the really unloved part, but the reporting from the companies to us, and then from us to our investors. So, it's an important part of the process. And and I am also very much involved in a lot of legal things, including, for example, the process of negotiating the main documents, like the LPA, the agreement with the investors. It's a very, very diverse.
It's very diverse.
Yeah.
How do you keep yourself sane? What is your kind of life hack to keep, because what you're sharing as responsibilities, it requires a very focused thinking. Yeah, all of them. It's not I don't know, going to events and networking to people. It's a bit more. You need a clear mind for that. So how do you?
I think the good thing about juggling with so many things is actually the diversity of things. If you had to do one and the same thing for 3 months, that would be killing me. But actually switching from one thing to another actually provides kind of excitement, if you wish.
Yes.
Or definitely saves me from boredom. So
but do you have your life hacks? I don't know, I see many VCs into kite surfing now. I don't know why kite surfing became so popular. Maybe because we're neighboring with Greece and it's so easier, to practice that. But
or maybe because it's a form of extreme sport. And yes, VCs are kind of risk prone.
Yes,
but,
they are.
I do yoga, but I wouldn't say that it's a life hack. It's a physical and mental exercise and a way to relax, but I wouldn't call that the life hack. I'm afraid I don't have anything very smart to share here.
Well,
another important thing for me is flexibility. So I get to work when I feel the most productive. So, if you, obviously there are things that you cannot postpone, but just don't push yourself at a time when you know that it's going to be just a waste of time. Do something else, spend some time with the kids, or
When you're spent and you don't have the energy, then better leave it and then do something else.
Yeah, because it's unproductive. You're not going to get your best work done. So, yeah.
And because I know that you have an insight into a couple of companies, and I'm not going to ask you to share any, secrets from your portfolio, but I'm going to phrase the question like this. So only this year we announced the first Bulgarian unicorn. Do you think this is a sign of a kind of like systemic success where we just show that the ecosystem can produce companies like that? Or was it like an outlier thing? Knowing your portfolio as well.
I think that the Southeastern Europe region is already on escape velocity. There is no stopping it.
No, okay.
Yeah, despite the unfavorable economic climate, I think it's only going to grow exponentially.
And you have investments actually anywhere around. Where do you think will the next unicorn come from?
Bulgaria.
Okay. Okay.
I don't know. I mean, just a guess.
It's just a guess. Okay. Yeah. We will see. We will wait and see. So after you've been participating in the ecosystem for now 10 years, how do you see the next 10 years evolving? So if you have to visualize, the future, what would it be in 10 years for the startup ecosystem? Where do you see it going? When you say there is no stopping now, I totally agree. But can we achieve also comparable success without knowing where we're going? Because at this point, sometimes when I talk to people, I like a bit the vision and the strategy. What do we want to be in 10 years? And this is why I'm asking you, what do you want us to be in 10 years? How do you visualize it? And isn't it time to think about strategies and visions as an ecosystem?
My vision is that the success would feed off itself. So we would be at the next generation of founders who would already be supported by the first generation of successful founders. And that would definitely contribute to just the exponential expansion of the whole system within. So, I mean, not sure whether this is visionary, but this is a very important thing that the system would actually be functioning, feeding off its own success, rather than the first 10 years were very much like the spark that
ignited,
started.
yes.
The progress was very much led by a few large institutional investors, and I think that their importance has already shrunk significantly, and I think that they would not be a huge factor in another 10 years. Like the private capital in the system would be the driving force.
I think at this point we were very much thinking in Bulgarians and Romanians and Greek, and everyone is pursuing their own success and they have like national strategies, but somehow I feel like these national borders, they're dissolving now. And we see also more and more cross-border investments. We see more and more cross-border teams as well. We see companies which are expanding from Serbia to Bulgaria, and then from Bulgaria to Romania, and then vice versa. So I think that maybe in a way we need to start thinking of the region similar to like the V4 states, and promote this kind of further integration also when it comes to business and technology and talent and so on and so forth. So if we do that, would that be beneficial for the region, for everyone? Is it going to open new opportunities?
Of course, and it's already happening. And I mean, there's been significant amount of co-investments from funds being operating from different places, but actually investing pan.
LAUNCHub was also one of the first, to do that in our region.
Yes, we have co-investments with practically funds from like any part of the region, but also like obviously UK, US funds, and some very, very big names we have on the like on the list of co-investors.
And you put, Southeast Europe on the map basically for them.
Yes, it's we've seen very prominent funds from like larger investment hubs, like looking very intensely at the region in the last 2-3 years. But when they come to the region, they rarely do it alone. They actually want a partner from the region that is closer to the ecosystem, and that would be actually kind of their stamp of approval for like the startups they're looking at.
It's funny because wherever I go abroad and I share where I come from, and the one thing that they know about Bulgaria is actually LAUNCHub Ventures, and maybe Stefan.
Everybody knows Stefan.
Everybody knows Stefan. So I think you started, this kind of ambassador work long enough in order to have this, image or this brand, which is cross-border, which is for the whole region, and it's not just only about Bulgaria. I find this very amazing because you identified this kind of, trend early on.
It was always, it's always been our vision that like we should not be like channel visioned to Bulgaria. And actually, this is one thing that has worked, as you said, quite nice for us, because like we get to see a lot of like the pool of investments and like the opportunity to understand where the good startups are. It's very important to have a broader vision, and. Yeah, so
I guess also when it comes to research, it helps, to have a broader vision, because then you kind of, start seeing the patterns and the trends. I have another question, and it's again about the ecosystem. So if we have to think of, Southeast Europe as a region that is a viable place where you can do innovation, which can be like a real innovation hub. And I'm going to very purposefully say Southeast Europe and not just now Bulgaria, or maybe it's some kind of interconnected network of cities like Bucharest, and then you have Sofia, and then you have Belgrade, and maybe you have also Istanbul and Athens. But let's say that this can be a cradle for a lot of innovations which are going to be relevant internationally. What could be the brand? If we, made in Germany is definitely a stamp that gives you the feeling that this technology will be good, like mechanical technology. What could be this kind of brand for Southeast Europe? What do you believe?
Well, there's an amazing pool of tech talent. So deep tech is definitely something that a lot of people already associate with the region.
Okay.
But I would love to see a lot more on the actually business development side. So to build like companies coming out of the region, which are actually not necessarily like something deeply innovative in terms of technology, but that have the entrepreneurial spirit and the leadership and the hustle to actually build a huge business. So that investors would be thinking people from that region are actually very good at building businesses. Not so much. I mean, of course. Technical innovation is here to stay. But
so you're speaking about the business acumen, where you know how to position your product, when you know how to manage growth, how to enter the international markets. Okay. This is definitely maybe an area where we need to up our game.
But it's happening.
It is happening.
Yeah. So I would love to actually see the champions that would make investors think of the region in that way.
Okay. That we can not only do tech, but we can also build businesses, solid businesses from here. Okay, that's interesting. What I observe now with, I don't know, working with younger people is that they're much more, or they have an increased awareness about environmental problems or societal problems. And I'm going to ask you a question like this, so which is again a bit more about the future. What kind of societal or maybe environmental challenge would you like to see solved by a startup which has roots somewhere in the region?
There are a lot of aspects to climate change.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, there's certainly a lot of opportunities for startups there.
A lot of market niches. Yes.
Yeah. I would probably twist the question in a bit different way. It would be good if a startup from the region actually tackles the problem of how big companies can actually implement successfully their ESG policies.
Oh, we already have this. Well, maybe not a startup which has been necessarily founded here, but at least with a Bulgarian founder, right? Okay.
Yes, but it's still an area that is still to be cracked.
Okay, true.
So, like actual working and useful way for companies to not only put the ESG on their website, but to actually implement it in a working way.
It is becoming better, I think. I remember when I was at the university back then, I wrote my bachelor thesis on the topic, and it was just introduced that big corp, which are listed on, which are public companies, they need to present some kind of sustainability report. It was made, obligatory for all of them. And at first it was like, what kind of thing is that? And they believe that it's kind of like a greenwashing kind of report where I'm going to put all the good stuff that I'm that I'm doing for the planet, although they might not have an impact. And then more and more requirements were put into that from a regulatory perspective. Now it's also the public opinion which is driving them into doing that. So I guess the pressure is playing its part, and I think also that
but it's
talent will define that. Yeah.
But it's become an operational nightmare, and again, it's. Even the companies which have it, which are trying to implement it, they can only go so far at this point of time. When you could choose your suppliers to be compliant with your ESG policy, but then you don't go into what their suppliers are, okay. And so on and so forth.
Okay, that's an interesting direction. Okay, to the founders who are maybe listening now, that's a direction that it's definitely worth going, where a lot of operational challenges to be solved. Irina, thank you for being at the Recursive podcast. Thank you for being here with us and also sharing, your experience so far of observing, this ecosystem for already 10 years. It's amazing how you saw it grow, and the successes that we can now celebrate. And in the beginning, you mentioned that you wanted to quit the rat race and not be part of, this little cubicle somewhere in an investment bank, and to do something where you definitely succeeded, because I think the contribution that LAUNCHub had on the development of the ecosystem was great, and you are part of that.
I'm very glad to be able to have some impact on something that, is an important part of the future of the region, the whole region. So yeah,
definitely. Thank you, Irina.
Thank you for having me.
Be in the loop of what is happening, especially in the sectors where.
And what is going to happen? How do you do the foresight?
I mean, the foresight is very specific. In every sector, it depends on the company. We're not experts in macro, but we understand micro. And the more time you have spent in a specific sector with a specific company, the more you understand the dynamics and you can see where this is heading. Yeah.
That's interesting. You have said before that crises make the greatest companies. But how do you teach resilience in the startup teams you work with?
I guess resilience is one of those things that you realize you have it when the crisis hits you. And hopefully you realize you have it, which we have seen with many companies that we have supported, and they went through very difficult times. Our role is there to support and let them know that these are not they're not the only ones who are going through difficult times. For instance, last time was Corona for us. We had many companies in the travel space or even companies like Blue Ground. But I think it's helpful that we have also been through very painful moments as entrepreneurs, and then if this comes, so if you're trying to help somebody and tell him that it's not only you, you have to fight and keep on going, it resonates better if the person who says that has been in that situation or even in a worse situation. So I think we can be, I strongly believe actually, we can be quite relevant and helpful in those discussions.
And if you're just as passionate about innovation as we are, hit subscribe for the Recursive podcast on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. We're everywhere.